What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Go Talk with Marcus, powered by Poddex, fueled by GoFuel. Once again, joining me on the show is who I have already accepted as the universally acknowledged favorite guest of the show by you, the people, Steezy A. Smith. Um, and Steezy won't acknowledge it, and maybe you guys won't, but I will. I know that you guys watch the show mainly because Steezy's on the show, and it's unfortunate, right, that you guys love the guests more than you love me, but it's whatever. I'm here for ratings and ratings only. So, what's up, bro? How you doing?
Oh man, Dwayne, man, I'm feeling great, feeling wonderful, feeling blessed. I hope you're doing the same.
I'm feeling good. I had CC come on to talk about the Broncos for two reasons. Number one, obviously because former quarterback of the Seattle Seahawks is now the quarterback of the Denver Broncos. That was easy. And then also, Steezy and I have gone back and forth about Denver's status this season, and I think it's appropriate that we finally kind of hash all this out. We've had a mild Twitter war. He and Justin jumped me on Justin's show a couple months ago, the week after it was announced that Russell Wilson went to Denver. So there's a lot riding on this episode. But before we get into all that, let's just start with Russell Wilson specifically. And I know it's going to happen, so just forgive me in advance. I'm probably going to call him Russell Westbrook at least twice in this show. I don't know why I do it. It just kind of happens, I guess. This is a stacked AFC West. You've got Derek Carr quarterbacking the Raiders. You have Pat Mahomes quarterbacking the Chiefs. You've got Justin Herbert quarterbacking the Chargers. Three guys, I think, me personally, are in my top 15 of the quarterbacks in the NFL. And then obviously you have Russell Wilson, who's also somewhere in there in the top 15. Where does Russell Wilson rank among the quarterbacks in the AFC West, specifically of those three other guys? Where is Russell Wilson?
Man, Dwayne, this was a tough one for me. Obviously Patrick Mahomes is top of the top, right? He's the cream of the crop. There's no debate about that, right? And so the question really comes down to, well, who's after Patrick Mahomes? And I'm scouring through. We got Russell Wilson. We got Justin Herbert. We got Derek Carr. I think it's safe to say that Derek Carr isn't in the same class as a Russell Wilson or Justin Herbert. So I think it's safe to put him at number 4. No disrespect to him. He's an above-average quarterback in the National Football League. I think he's a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. I don't know if you agree or disagree, but that's a conversation to be had another time. So I'm torn between Russell Wilson and Justin Herbert. When I look at Justin Herbert, I think he's more dynamic. I think he's more explosive. I think he's more talented. The production obviously is overwhelmingly in his favor. Talent is also in his favor, but look, you asked me how would I rank the quarterbacks in the AFC West, and when it comes to rankings like these, I also consider, whether or not the guy that I'm picking can take my team to the playoffs. Has he taken my team, or has he taken teams to the playoffs? Has he had, accomplishments, and has he led teams before? Russell Wilson might not be as talented as a Justin Herbert. Statistically, he might not be as productive as a Justin Herbert, but what I know Russell Wilson is, he's a proven winner. He's not going to turn the football over, and he's worked with a lot less than what Justin Herbert has had to work with, and he's done more. And so I think that being said, slightly and just by a hair, and I actually had Herbert ranked over Wilson just a couple of months ago. But I am on record saying I'm not married to my statements. My statements are fluid, and just from time to time they can change. And so, look, I'm going to say I think Russell Wilson is the second best quarterback in the AFC West. I know he's not as talented, he's not as productive as Justin Herbert, but Russell Wilson, like I said, and I can't stop saying this, is a proven winner. He's accomplished. He doesn't turn the ball over. He's a leader. And I just think with his resume and what he's been able to do, he's still in his prime. I think now in the system where, they are going to let him cook and they are going to let him be the centerpiece. They are going to let him be the focus of the offense. We are going to start to see Russell Wilson, hopefully statistically, start to trend upward. And so right now, I got to go Russell Wilson, but it is just barely by a hair. Second best quarterback in the AFC West.
I think Justin Herbert's the second best quarterback in the AFC West. And it's not that it's not close, because it's close. I just feel like we don't show Justin Herbert enough love, in my opinion. I don't think we do. Justin Herbert, his rookie year, 31 touchdowns, 10 picks, 4,300 yards. This past season, he threw for 5,000 yards. That's the second most in the NFL. He threw for 38 touchdowns, which is the third most. He had 15 interceptions. He played really great football. And in both of those seasons, the only reason why Justin Herbert hasn't, in my opinion, been in an AFC Championship game, because I think he's that good, and I think this Chargers team has been that good both seasons, is because he's had to deal with two bad coaches making bad decisions down the stretch of these seasons. You look at Anthony Lynn consistently making bad decisions through the course of that season in 2020, leading that team to just be abysmal when they shouldn't have been. You look at last year, while the record was better than it was in 2020, again, the terrible decision at the end of the ball game by Brandon Staley leads the Chargers to once again be sitting at home and not being in the playoffs, when before he made that decision, the Chargers were on pace to be going to the playoffs. Justin Herbert's talented. Now, to your point, Justin Herbert does have more talent around him, not just on offense, but also on defense. He does have a lot more talent defensively. You look at the Chargers defense, they have a Derwin James and a Joey Bosa. They just got J.C. Jackson and Khalil Mack, two of the best players at their respective positions in the league at this point. They've stacked up that defense. And of course, offensively, you have Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, who I still will die on this hill to this day. I think it's the most underrated and most disrespected wide receiver tandem in the NFL today. You have an Austin Eckler, and one of, not I think, I know, one of the better offensive lines in the NFL. All that being said, though, there's nothing that Russell Wilson can do except for mobility that Justin Herbert can't do. And that is why it's very easy for me to look at Justin Herbert and say that Justin Herbert's better. There was no quarterback better last year than Justin Herbert on 3rd and 4th downs. And that's where you make your money as a quarterback. Justin Herbert was perfect on 4th downs in that last game of the season last year in Las Vegas to potentially go into the playoffs. I believe he was 8 for 8 on 4th downs completing in that game. Put on a clinic. He is fantastic. He had I think he was ranked, hit a 94 passer rating on those downs. Like, he was superb, threw for almost 3,000 yards on those downs last season. He was fantastic. So I can rely on him when it really matters on 3rd and 4th down. He's an accurate passer. He's not going to turn the ball over. Okay, he's thrown 25 interceptions combined his first 2 seasons. He's still young, but even still, he doesn't make his percentage of turnover-worthy plays isn't alarming. He's not sloppy with the ball. He's going to give you as many touchdowns as anybody and as few as interceptions as anybody. He's fantastic. He's super accurate. And the only thing that I definitively give the edge to Russell Wilson over, that I give to Russell Wilson over Justin Herbert, is the mobility. And that's because Justin Herbert's just not a mobile guy. Not that he can't be mobile, because we have seen Justin Herbert scramble before, but he's not known for his mobility. We look at Russell Wilson, he's more of the scrambler kind of guy. Him and Colin Kaepernick back in the day, that was kind of the main reason why we enjoyed watching Seahawks and 49ers play football, was to see two dual threat quarterbacks kind of duke it out. I think Justin Herbert's better. I think Justin Herbert's a top 5 quarterback in the league. I mean, it's really splitting hairs. It's not. It really is splitting hairs. I think if you have to pick right now, I think you pick Justin Herbert before you pick Russell Wilson. I do. So that's just in the division, right? But of course, there's 16 teams in the conference, so there's 13 other quarterbacks outside of this division. You're looking at your Josh Allens, your Joe Burrows, your Lamar Jacksons. You've got Mac Jones out there in New England. You have Zach Wilson. You got Tua Tagovailoa or Teddy Bridgewater, depending on how they go there. Miami. Let's just say right now that's Tua, right? You have Ryan Tannehill. You've got Matt Ryan. You've got Trevor Lawrence. You have Davis Mills. Then you've got, let's say for right now, let's say Mitchell Trubisky in Pittsburgh. You've got, well, the Browns don't have a quarterback right now, but I believe right now that'd be Jacoby Brissett, because I doubt Deshaun Watson is going to play ball, and they don't want Baker Mayfield to play ball for them. So I'm assuming that their quarterback is going to be Jacoby Brissett. All these quarterbacks, where does Russell Wilson rank among all of the quarterbacks in the AFC?
This one, without a doubt, he's still got to be a top 3, top 5 quarterback in my eyes. I have him officially ranked at number 3, after Patrick Mahomes, after Josh Allen, 1 spot ahead of Joe Burrow, and then 2 spots ahead of Justin Herbert. But then again, I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm a little maybe I'm still too in love with what he has done in Seattle. You know, his resume, what he's accomplished. You know, his leadership, and what he's been able to do in this league. I still do believe he's in his prime, and so maybe if entering next year he's not nearly as talented as a Joe Burrow and a Justin Herbert, then that's totally fine, because I think in Denver he has the pieces around him to succeed. I think he has the pieces to win, and we will touch on this later. I think they're Super Bowl contenders, and so I think because they have that status, that automatically elevates Russell Wilson in conversations like this. I understand last year was injury plagued. I understand last year he threw for, I think, his lowest passing yards in the season since his rookie year. But again, he missed 3 games, and then 3 others he just wasn't ready to play. We saw him against the Cardinals. We saw him get shut out by your Packers. Obviously and clearly, he was not ready to play. Washington football team, he held his own, but he still wasn't ready to play. And so the final numbers don't look good, but 25-6, and that's considered a bad year? That's considered a great year, a good year, a career year for a lot of quarterbacks. And so when we look at Russell Wilson and we think that that's a bad year for him, I think that only illustrates just how much and how good of a quarterback he is. And so I think no matter if you put him at 4 or 5 or 3, he has got to be a top 5 quarterback in the entire AFC. If you want to slide him at 5, I'm totally fine with that. But anywhere from 3 to 5, that's why I'd have to put Russell Wilson in the class of quarterbacks in the AFC.
Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, Joe Burrow are 4 guys I would absolutely today take over Russell Wilson. Now, the Herbert and the Burrow argument is close because they're young and they're not as accomplished. But I'd still take him over Russell Wilson. There are 2 guys in the conference, though, that I look at, and it's a really, really, really tight argument. And that is Deshaun Watson, if he's healthy and he doesn't have health problems. He's got keeping his hands to himself problems. But if he's available for the Browns, there's an argument to be made that Deshaun Watson is better than Russell Wilson. And I think that it's not a strong one, but people will make it. I'm not going to make it. I'm just throwing the name out. Okay. I would never say that Deshaun Watson's better than Russell Wilson. I have never said that Deshaun Watson's better, but there are people who would make that argument. And the other one is Lamar Jackson. It's tough for Russ because Russ is the second longest tenured quarterback in the league, if I'm not mistaken, after Aaron Rodgers. He's the oldest quarterback in the conference currently. There's just a lot of young guys. Like, I know he's better than Tua. That's easy. And Zach Wilson. I know he's better than Mac Jones. Like, that's obvious, right? And you know,
Derek Carr.
Of course, you know he's better than Derek Carr. You know he's better than Kenny Pickett or Mitchell Trubisky, or both of them combined. Like, it doesn't matter. He's like, it's really just those 2 guys. Again, I won't make an argument for Deshaun Watson because I'd take Russ over Deshaun Watson. But there are people that would make that argument, and it's not a crazy argument to make because I think, again, there are a lot of things that Russell Wilson does that Deshaun Watson can do. Like, there's not a lot. I think sometimes we try to separate quarterbacks by ability, but it's like, well, everything that Pat Mahomes can do, Josh Allen can do. And you can make a legitimate argument that there are a lot of things that Josh Allen can do better than Pat Mahomes. And the same can be said for a lot of guys that are the cream of the crop. I would slot Russell Wilson at 5. I think I've already said that Justin Herbert's better. I have Justin Herbert at 4. I think Joe Burrow's 3. I really, from the bottom of my heart, really think that the Cincinnati Bengals are I know that this wasn't this was not a one-off thing, right? I know that for the Bengals, this had a lot more to do with them than it had to do with like Lamar being hurt and the Ravens not being what we thought they were going to be, and the Browns kind of fluttering because of Baker problems and like all of that stuff. Like, this is a legitimate team, a legitimate threat. They were just in the Super Bowl, for crying out loud. And even though they lost control of it towards the end, I know, look, we can play the if game all we want, but it's a valid point to be made that if Joe Burrow has just one more second on that final play of that Super Bowl, the Bengals win the Super Bowl because, and Joe Burrow's admitted it, originally he wasn't the Jamar didn't have a go route. He was wide open because Joe Burrow checked that go route, and that's where he was going with the ball. He just needed one more second. And I fervently believe that we haven't given Joe Burrow enough credit. And I think we do that a lot of times with teams that kind of are Cinderella teams we don't expect. Like, we kind of do this thing where like, oh, they're there because of this. Like, we did it with the Suns and the Bucks last year. Like, oh, well, if KD and Kyrie wasn't hurt, the Bucks would never been to the finals. Yeah, well, that's not the Bucks' fault. Like the Bucks still had to play was in front of them. Same thing for the Suns. Like, oh, if AD wasn't hurt last season, the Suns probably wouldn't have made it to the finals. You can make that argument, sure. Like, I can make the argument, and I have made the argument that if Kyrie and K Love weren't injured in 2015, the Warriors wouldn't have won that championship. Like, there's always this games of ifs.
Every single year.
The matter is right, but the fact of the matter is, like, Joe Burrow is a proven talent. He is a phenomenal talent. He's only going to continue to get better. Right now, I take Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert ahead of Russell Wilson, but it's really, really close. Like, it's not one of those things. Like I think the only two guys that are clearly better than Russell Wilson are Josh Allen and Pat Mahomes. I think that's it. And I think Josh Allen's the best quarterback in the conference, and Pat Mahomes is number 2. Like, I fervently believe that. And I'll kind of dive into my quarterback rankings later on as the season gets closer. But Russell Wilson's number 5 for me. But like you said, 3 to 5 is fair. I think the only guy outside of those 4 guys that legitimately has an argument that, like, most people would accept is Lamar Jackson. There are a lot of people that still think that Lamar Jackson doesn't get a lot of love. And like I said, you can say Deshaun Watson. There aren't a lot of people that would argue Deshaun Watson, but there are a handful of people that could make an argument that Deshaun Watson is better than Russell Wilson. I don't subscribe to that belief because he's not better than Russell Wilson. But there is an argument, I guess, that can be made as far as a talent and ability standpoint.
A small one.
A very small one. It's not. It would have to be an airtight argument, and I don't know if there's an airtight one, but you can try to make one. So Russell Wilson obviously goes from DK and Tyler Lockett to Jerry Jeudy and Cortland Sutton, and I think we've gone back and forth about this a little bit as it pertains to which wide receiver duo is better. But is Denver's wide receiver core top 10?
That's a great question. Just to kind of go back to what you brought up, Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy versus DK and Tyler Lockett, I don't think that's a debate at all. I mean, for that to even be a debate, I think it's just disrespectful towards a DK Metcalf and a Tyler Lockett. Those guys are not only far more accomplished, they're just better. They're far more talented statistically, production-wise, talent-wise, ceiling. I think everything's in their favor. And so that's not even a conversation. I don't know who's brought up debates such as that one, but that's just not even a conversation. But going back to the question, I wrote down some of the teams that I feel like have top 10 wide receiver corps, and I'm not including tight ends here because I only saw the word wide receiver, and so I'm not looking at it as if, oh, these are the pass catchers on these teams. It's just wide receivers. But I got the Buffalo Bills in no order, by the way. I got the Buffalo Bills. I got the Miami Dolphins. I got the Cincinnati Bengals.
Just real quick question. I just want to make sure we're clear. When we're talking wide receiver core, we're talking 3 to 4, not just 1 and 2. Just so everyone at home knows, when I'm saying, I don't mean the X and Y guy. I mean the X, the Y, the Z, and maybe like the 4th guy that comes into. So we're talking the best group of 3 to 4 in the league. Go ahead.
Oh, no doubt. And thanks for clarifying that.
Yep.
I definitely kept that in mind. Cincinnati Bengals, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the New Orleans Saints, who I think they went from having arguably the worst wide receiver corps to now having, I think, a top 3 attack. I mean, you get a Michael Thomas back, you get Chris Olave, who you draft, one of the smoothest route runners I've ever seen coming out of college, and then a Jarvis Landry. Sheesh, Jameis Winston got a lot to work with.
Holloway, who definitely did big things, and was a big part of the reason why I had the Saints going to the playoffs last season before Jameis Winston got hurt. Like, because we crapped on the Saints, specifically the wide receiver core, because they didn't have Michael Thomas, and Marquez Callaway just stepped up immensely and was a major deep threat. Like, I unfortunately witnessed it in week 1 of the season in that 33-3 spanking of my Packers. But Marquez Callaway, I think he's not going to lose it. Well, he's going to lose his number 1 status, but he's not going to be forgotten in that rotation. He's still going to get his playing time, and he's still going to see the field this season too.
Exactly, and I think he's even better now that he's the 4th wide receiver on the depth chart. He's not going to have to go up against number 1 cornerbacks. And so for him to kind of step into that number 1 role last year, I think he underwhelmed, right? Because as a number 1 receiver, you expect to put up 1,000 yards or whatnot. But, I mean, he wasn't ready for the role.
See, and I don't think he underwhelmed. I think he actually overexceeded because he's not number 1 talent. And also, remember, he played the last half of the season without his number 1 quarterback. So even though he didn't put up 1,000 yards, which is right, that is what you expect from a number 1 receiver is 1,000 yards. He's not number 1 receiver talent. He was kind of put into because if we're being honest, he would have been the number 2, maybe number 3 receiver last season if Michael Thomas was healthy. Right. But like life happens. People get hurt. Marquez Callaway has seen number one talent. He did his fair share to the best of his ability, right? You bring in a guy in Jarvis Landry, who's a veteran, who I still think is a very reliable wide receiver. And we'll see that a lot when he's opposite Michael Thomas, right? Although there are a lot of people that don't think Michael Thomas is going to ever play in the Saints uniform again. Let's say that is the case. Let's play the if game. I don't subscribe to that, but let's say Michael Thomas is done in New Orleans. Okay, well, if Jarvis is number one, then Olave or Callaway is number two. Like, there's still not that pressure of having to see the Jalen Ramseys and the Jair Alexanders and the Trey Whites and all of these number one corners that you would potentially have to deal with if you were the X receiver. So for Marquez Callaway, even if he's the second or third option this season, he's still going to produce. He's going to have a better season, I think, this season than he did the last season statistically, because he has the experience as the number one receiver. He did okay in it, and you can even make an argument that he did much better than a lot of people expected. And now he has all that talent. He gets to go and do kind of what his talent
suggests
him to be, which is that 3-4 guy, and he'll still be a threat.
So my bad, bro. I should have clarified by saying I think as a prototypical number one for a team, he underwhelmed, but relative to his talent and what he came in with, he definitely overachieved. I mean, just oh my gosh, yeah, he overachieved. Like, nobody expected him to do what he did, even as a deep threat. And so, yeah, for that, I think the Saints most definitely have a top 3 wide receiver corps in the National Football League. You got to put the Rams in there. You got to put the Cardinals in there. And I'm assuming that's with the healthy and a not suspended DeAndre Hopkins, by the way. Minnesota Vikings, I think that they're in there. I know they're mostly headlined by an Adam Thielen and a Justin Jefferson, but KJ Osborne definitely showed flashes last year. And so I think that's enough to kind of put them in the top 10. Philadelphia Eagles, AJ Brown, and Devontae Smith. I know they're also taking up, such a huge chunk of what makes that wide receiver corps so great, but they also have some pieces. Former first round pick Jalen Reagor has been a disappointment relative to his standing as to, where he was drafted, but you got to put Philly in there. And slotting in, I think, towards the bottom of that top 10, I think is Denver. I mean, Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, like I said, they don't stack up to a DK and a Tyler Lockett as far as a top 2 or as far as a duo goes. But as far as depth, Denver has plenty of depth. I mean, Tim Patrick recently signed a 3-year, $30 million contract last year. We have a KJ Hamler, former second-round pick who tore his ACL, but he's starting to, to look good in training camp. He talked about how he wants to be that Tyler Lockett for Russell Wilson. He's a deep threat. He has speed. He is more of a complimentary receiver, but Denver has a whole bunch of depth along their wide receiver corps. And for that, yes, they most definitely have a top 10 wide receiver corps in the National Football League.
Okay, so I've got Buffalo. I agree with you. Is in the top 10. I agree with the Saints is in the top 10. Eagles as well. With a healthy D-Hop, you can put the Cardinals in there for sure. You've got, I'm trying to think off the top of my head.
Either the Rams with A-Rob, Cooper.
You've got the Rams in there, sure. You've got I'm not high on their wide receiver corps, but that has a lot more to do with their quarterback than it does the talent in the wide receiver room. You've got the Dolphins for sure.
Yeah. Bengals.
Of course, you've got the Bengals. I'm kind of hurt that you don't have the Chargers in there. I think the Chargers still have a top 10 wide receiver corps, and I know
they just barely missed the cut. Barely.
It's a close one. But me personally, I would take the Chargers wide receiver room over the Broncos wide receiver room. They are rather top heavy, right? Like the Eagles, like they're rather top heavy. The depth is kind of questionable, but it's there, and I think I know when if they're going, they're going. Like when you look at the Chargers, when they're going, they're going. I think, and I said this on the Commander show. Check that out. I said on the Commander show that with Terry McLaurin, John Dotson, and Curtis Samuel, if Curtis Samuel's healthy, I said that could be the best wide receiver corps in the division. I think if Jahan Dotson is as advertised, because I don't know about you, but the consensus is he had the best hands in the draft. And his catch radius is one of the best in the draft. And if he develops and he is as advertised alongside Terry McLaurin, who is of the 4 3-year guys that have been making headlines this season with Debo, DK, himself, and AJ Brown, I think he is the second best out of that group behind DK Metcalf. It's really close between him and AJ, but I'd take Terry over AJ. I think the Washington Commanders have I'm not putting them in my top 10. I think they have a chance by the end of the season. Carson Wentz is okay. They'll be a top 10 receiver.
Which he was in Indy last year, right? 27-7. I mean,
Right.
Playoff failures aside, I mean, statistically.
Right. I think last year, speaking of Indy, I think last year the Colts proved that even though they don't have a sexy name in the wide receiver room, that they proved they have a top 10 wide receiver core. With Zach Pascal and Michael Pitt. We have to remember T.Y. Hilton was injured for most of the season. Like, he didn't really see the field that much. And he's not at all what he once was when it was him and Andrew Luck, but he is still useful. And I think the 49ers have a better wide receiver room than the Denver Broncos as well. They're a run-first team, so we kind of don't focus on the wide receiver room. I would take San Francisco's wide receiver room over Denver's, and I have Denver at 11. Like, it's really just splitting hairs. I don't think Denver's top 10, and it's not because they don't have the talent, because they have the talent, but this is a wide receiver room that is plagued with injury at the top all the way down to the bottom, number one, and that's the biggest kind of red flag. But the number two, and more importantly, is as talented as they are, I think, and it's not their fault. Similarly with Miami, it's not their fault, but I think it's really going to be interesting to see exactly what they look like when they've got a consistently good quarterback, right? Like, obviously you expect them to look better and put up better numbers because Russell Wilson is light years better than any of the quarterbacks that they've had throwing them the balls over the past couple seasons with Drew Lock and whoever else has been down. I think Teddy Bridgewater was in Denver for a bit as well, obviously. But the injury does concern me, and there's a consistency issue, a mild consistency issue because of injury, where you don't always know. Again, from a talent perspective, they're all talented. You don't always know what you're getting from Cortland Sutton on a week-to-week basis. Same can be said for Jerry Jeudy. And while they have the depth where they can compete as far as depth is concerned with the best of the best in the league, it's just consistency is a big thing for me with this wide receiver room. And that's why I'm so hesitant to kind of just anoint them top 10. It's not crazy to put them in the top 10. But if there's that team like that's at 9 and 10, the two teams that are at 9 and 10 that I would take ahead of them, it'd be Los Angeles, the Chargers, Los Angeles, and the 49ers, I think, are the two teams that, while they also have injury problems, you know when they're all healthy what you're getting from every single one of them. I think Keenan Allen's still top 15. I think Mike Williams is top 20, top 25, somewhere in there. And, of course, you've got Debo, who, while we loved him so much for his hybrid stuff, he still put up, I think he had over 1,000 yards receiving and like at least 5 touchdowns receiving as well. Then you've got Brandon Ayuk and the rest. It's close though. It's close. It's not a wash. It's really close.
But Dwayne, so you talked about how the Chargers, they're more top heavy, right, than a team like the Denver Broncos, because in totality, the Broncos have a lot more depth at wide receiver. If the Chargers are top heavy, aren't the Niners even more top heavier? Because we have a Deebo Samuel, right? But he also has his own injury issues. Brandon Ayuk, he's been so-and-so. I thought he took a step back.
Brandon Ayuk the right way, and that's why I think we don't love Brandon Ayuk the way you should. Not you.
Say that one more time.
Just in general, I don't think the 49ers are using Brandon Ayuk to the best of his ability, and that's why it's so hard to be sold on him. I think we've seen games from Brandon Ayuk where, like, well,
seen flashes.
Yeah, and I think in those games, those are the games when they used him to the best of his ability. I don't think, because this is such a run-heavy team, that they don't use him all the time to the best of his ability. Like, you look at how Buffalo uses, well, in the regular season anyway, use like a Cole Beasley. You look at how last season Dallas used a Cedric Wilson or Michael Gallup, like being that slot guy that at times would line up on the opposite side of number one. Like, that's kind of where Brandon Ayuk should be, and he's not. And in the games when that's where he was, whether it was due to injury or just game planning or whatever, we saw those flashes. Like when he, I think they had a game against the Eagles last season, or at some point maybe the year before, and he looked fantastic. And it's because they were using him in that slot role. That's what he is. He's a slot receiver. They don't always use him in the slot, and I think that is the detriment to Brandon Ayuk. But no, you're right. The 49ers are very top heavy. I also think, though, that because they have the best tight end in football, that the wide receiver core is kind of overlooked sometimes because they've got George Kittle out there, and he can do everything. He's got the charisma. He is the most complete tight end, in my opinion, in the NFL. That we kind of forget about Debo and Brandon Ayuk and all the guys they've got at the receiver position.
Hey, I mean, can't argue with you there. He is that good.
He is that good. So this is probably where things are going to get dicey. A couple months ago, when we were on the show with Justin and we were kind of recapping everything that happened with the quarterbacks, one of the main things that you were talking about is to the reason why you believe that the Broncos were Super Bowl contenders is because they had a really solid defense, and they did last season. They had a fantastic defense,
and they still do.
They do on paper. The players are talented. They do still have a fantastic defense. But I think what we've neglected to acknowledge is they have a new defensive coordinator and Vic Fangio, who, say which one about him as a head coach, he was a defensive guy. He wanted to make sure that defense was top notch. He's no longer there. They have an offensive-minded head coach and Nathaniel Hackett, who was the offensive coordinator for my Packers last year and the past couple years. And they've got a new defensive coordinator. Can this defense still be elite despite all of the turnover in the coaching staff?
Emphatically, yes. I know the new defensive coordinator is, what's his name? G.O.A.T, and he was the former secondary coach and passing game coordinator for the Denver Broncos. I understand Vic Fangio and his presence is no longer there, but come on, brother. I mean, this defense finished second in the NFL last year in terms of least amount of points per game allowed at 18.9, so under 20. They finished eighth in terms of least amount of yards per game allowed at 326.1, and that was without DJ Jones, who they signed this year. That was without Randy Gregory, who they signed this year. That was without Kwan Williams, who they signed as a depth piece from the 49ers. That was without a Pat Surtain. Well, Pat Surtain was a rookie last year, and people were already marveling at how spectacular and how great he looked. Isn't it expected that he's only going to take a step and a leap forward? Don't they still have Justin Simmons, one of the best safeties in football? Didn't Bradley Chubb miss more than half of the season last year? And so I expect him to be healthy. I expect a DJ Jones to stuff the run. I expect a Kwan Williams to provide quality depth in the secondary. I understand this isn't the no-fly zone like it used to be with the Chris Harris and the TJ Ward. Remember that secondary that they used to have with Peyton Manning and the Broncos back in their heyday? But come on, brother, this team is still young on defense. They have talent at all three levels. They have a pass rush. And keep in mind, last year, they finished with those numbers despite not having Von Miller for half the year, because they did trade him at the trade deadline, and yet they still were able to field a more than competent unit. And I understand, I'm not trying to disregard what Coach Vic Fangio brings to the table. He is one of the more elite minds, especially defensively, and so they are. And I do expect them to take a small and a slight step back. But at the end of the day, I just truly believe that the players that are on the field, Randy Gregory, if he can get his mind right, and Denver, they handed him out that money for a reason. And I hope, and the expectation is that, barring health, there aren't going to be any sort of suspensions or any off the field issues with the Randy Gregory. I know we're banking on a lot, but he did receive a ton of money. And so if he wants to earn, a big portion, because I know some of that contract was full of incentives. And so if he does want to earn a good chunk of his money, he is going to have to be on the field. But Randy Gregory went on the field as a very talented pass rusher. He can get after the quarterback. Again, DJ Jones is a great run stuffer, a very underrated piece of that 49ers defense in the last couple of years. Pat Surtain, everybody has been raving about him. I wanted him to land in Seattle as a part of that trade package to get a Russ Wilson. Now I can see why Denver wanted to hold on to him, because he's just that damn good. I mean, coming over from Alabama, we know what he's capable of. He's a leader. He's polished. He came in ready to play. And so, yes, they are going to take a slight step back. I think early in the year, we are going to, see signs of Denver's defense, maybe a couple cracks in the armor and whatnot. But I think come by the end of the year, I mean, they had talent at all three levels. They have a pass rush. They have a no-fly zone, at least a variation of that. They are able to stuff the run. I know they're playing in a loaded division, but this defense can and most definitely will still be elite. I'm not expecting it to be the best defense in football. It doesn't have to be top 3, but top 5, I think, is most certainly attainable. And I think being a top 5 defense, you deserve the distinction of being called an elite unit. And so, yes, to answer your question, yes, Denver does still have the pieces, even with the turnover in the coaching staff. They are still going to field an elite defense, just with some growing pains to start off.
So aside from 6 games in the AFC West, where they'll be facing 2 of last season's top 10 offenses, you've got the Rams in there, you've got the the Cardinals in there. I mean, this is a talented roster. I am not on the Denver Broncos hype train. I'm sorry, just not. This team's not going to suck. Obviously, this team is going to have the best season it's had since they made it to the Super Bowl, which is the last time they've been in the playoffs. That I know, that I recognize. I am just not ready to core. We have to look at things from a big picture standpoint. From a big picture standpoint, they're bringing in a new defensive coordinator, which means that likely the schematics and game planning from week to week as far as how their prep is going to be different. You don't have a defensive-minded head coach who was also another asset, another add-on to the defensive schematics that we saw last season. You're right. They've got all the talent. I'm not going to list all the names because you just did it as I expected you to. You did my job for me. I appreciate you for that. But I don't think it's insane to expect a slight drop-off. This is still a young team. There are still injury-prone players on the team. There are still players on this team that are new and have to get used to things, right? Like, there are a lot of different moving parts. And so while I think that this is at least going to be a top 10 defense this season, I think that's stamped. They will be top 10. I don't know if they'll be top 5, though. I mean, I think the Bills will still have the best defense in football this season. Obviously, look at the Rams. I don't think the Rams finished top 5 last season, but they did finish in the top 10. They were the best defense in football 2 years ago. I expect them to get back to their top 5 positioning. The Saints still have a fantastic defense, and they added the Honey Badger. I expect them to be a really good defense. As much as I hate the fact that we didn't address any of our major offensive needs in the offseason, the Packers are likely going to have a top 5 defense this season, just with all the pieces that they were able to keep from last year. Also with your Devondre Campbells and your Rasul Douglases, we just extended Jair Alexander, and then I didn't appreciate it at the time, you bring in Wyatt, and so like the Packers are going to have a really good defense this season. I still expect the Bucs to have a good defense this season, a fantastic defense. Like it's so crowded at the top defensively, and a lot of these defenses are veteran defenses, but some of these defenses are young defenses. By the end of the season, will they be a top 5 defense? It's very possible. I'm not completely ignoring the fact that's possible, but if we're talking just right here, right now, I can name at least 5 defenses as of today that are better than the Broncos defense before the season has actually started. And that's my only hesitation to just anoint them as an elite defense. Again, you look at the Bills defense. I didn't even mention the Browns defense. That's one of the better defenses in the league last season. I think the Steelers will improve defensively. They've got one of the best defensive players and 2 of the best defensive players in football in T.J. Watt and Minkah Fitzpatrick. They had to use Minkah Fitzpatrick as a 5th linebacker last season because the linebacker core was so disgusting. Well, they brought in Brian Flores to be their senior defensive coordinator or their senior defensive assistant and linebackers coach, who was responsible for the turnaround of the Miami Dolphins defense. That's going to be a good like there are a lot of really, really, really good defenses in the NFL. And I think aside from the Rams, the Bills, and the Bucs, that are the 3 defenses that are bona fide. Like, we know that they're going to be somewhere in that top 5 when it's all said and done. The fight for those other 2 spaces, it's just really congested when you're looking at the Packers, when you're looking at even a defense like the Saints, when you're looking at all these other defenses. So I'm going to say they're top 10. I'm not going to deny them a top 10 spot because I can't name 10 defenses that are better than theirs. But once you get past those first 2 that I named, Rams, Bills, and Buccaneers, there are arguments to be made that there are 2 other defenses, potentially, no matter where you look, whether it's the Saints or whoever, that are maybe better than the Denver Broncos defense. Right now, 6 weeks into the season, 10 weeks into the season, that can obviously change, right? Once they've got their feet under them. But as it stands today, I'm not going to say that this is an elite defense just yet.
No, and that's fair. And so going off what you just said, do you categorize teams, that you place in the top 5 as elite and not the top 10? If I phrase that correctly.
Makes sense. Top 5 is elite. I think.
Okay, and the top 10 is not elite.
They're a step below, I would say.
Step below. And does this go for other, like when we're quantifying like quarterbacks and anything else?
I have always held, no matter what the sport is, I've always held that position. If you are top 5, you are elite. You're cream of the crop. Anything below top 5, like 6 to 10, it's like almost
Just a notch below.
Just a slight notch. I mean, like when you look at like now there are some exceptions, right? Like there in my opinion, there are only 4 elite quarterbacks in the NFL. There are only 4 elite quarterbacks in the NFL at this point. Josh Allen, Pat Mahomes, Tom Brady, and Aaron Rodgers. Those are only 4 guys I look at that are elite, right? You could throw a Justin Herbert or a Joe Burrow or Russell Wilson in there. You can do that to make it around top 5. But those are the 4 guys that I know definitively are the elite guys in the league, right? I can say the same thing for wide receivers. I can say that we can go all the way down the list. You look at cornerbacks, D linemen, linebackers, like top 5 are elite. Now, what happens is, and it's similar to basketball, not to go on a tangent here, similar to basketball with like superstars, right? Like there are 5 superstars that are undeniable in the NBA. Steph Curry, LeBron James, Kevin Durant, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Kawhi Leonard when he's healthy. Those are the 5 guys undeniably that are superstars because
Undisputed,
because you look at the last, what are we talking, 10 to 12 years, one of those 5 guys, with an exception of once in 2011, was on a team that won a championship. LeBron James, Steph, like you need one of those guys to win a championship. So it's the same thing with teams, right? There are 5 elite teams in the NFL. I'm not going to tell you who because I've got a whole series planned for that later on down the line. I'm not going to spoil that. That would be sabotage. But elite, it's top 5. 6 to 10, it's those guys that have the elite talent, but like
and capabilities,
and they've got the capabilities, but they're not there yet, right? And then you've got your 11 to 15, and those are just your really, really, really good guys, or your really
Pro Bowl level,
right? Those are the guys that are going to be your Pro Bowls. Now, what I will say, the one thing that all top 10s have in common is the top 10 quarterbacks or whatever. All those guys are all pro talented, right? And so 6 to 10 are my all pro guys, like my guys that I like. They're not the best of the best, but they're right there. Like they're all pro or like all NBA or like whatever you want, depending on the sport, whatever it is. You go to 11, 15, those are your really, really, really good Pro Bowl guys that you're saying. You got 16 to 20. 16 to 20, those are your above average guys, your starters, your teams that are just kind of like in the middle of the pack, maybe a couple of pieces away from figuring things out. You got 21 to 25, that's average. 20, well, when you're talking about players anyway, that's average. That's your whatever. Once you get to 26 to 32, if we're talking teams, you suck. If we're talking players, those are just like the below average starters or the guys that aren't proven. And we can keep going on and on and on down the list, right? There's 32 teams in the NFL, and so depending on what you're ranking, everything changes. So if you're going to rank just one team's in a slot, well, then that kind of varies, right? You still got your cream of the crop. You've got your defenses, for example, right? 1 through 5, those are your elite defenses, right? Your championship caliber defenses, right? Then you've got 6 to 10. Those are your solid defenses. You don't want to see them on your schedule. They're not as mean or as daunting as 1 through 5, but they're still a tough defense to play against. And you've got your 11 through 15s. Those are your above average defenses where they can get the job done, but they're going to need some help from their offense. 16 to 20, average. You don't know what you're getting from this defense on a week-to-week basis because it can vary. 21 to 25 is below average, and 26 to 32 are like just terrible. I don't know. This defense just is disgusting. So like it really just all depends. But yes, that's a very long-winded way to answer your question of saying 1 through 5, no matter what the situation is, are the elite of the elite of the elite of the elite of the elite. Like these are the 5 teams, 5 guys, whatever that I'm taking before I even look anyone else's direction. It's 1 through 5 is elite. And I think that should, and I feel like that's the best way to do it. Like I feel like that should be the consensus, is that should be how you define elite, because it's hard to be elite. Like it is hard to be elite, because elite it's not just a talent thing, it's a consistency thing. Like it's not just like you've got the best talent on the field. It's that this is the best talent, and they're consistently showing that they're the best talent. And so I'm not going to say that there's 10 elite teams that aren't 10 elite defenses, because that's 33% of the league. That doesn't make any sense to me if you've got 10 elite defenses. Now, if you want to say 6 or 7, I mean, I look at you and it depends on who that 6 or 7 is. So interesting enough, all of that brings us into the Super Bowl contender conversation about the Denver Broncos. Because, and before we discuss whether or not we think they are or not, what I do want to talk about is, in your mind, what makes a Super Bowl contender a Super Bowl contender? Like, what are the criteria in your mind to be a contender for the Super Bowl?
It's a great question. Love it. I think for the most part, I think a great duo, a dynamic duo, if you will, at quarterback and head coach. You know, as long as you have those two ingredients, I think for the most part, you know, even if you're not just an automatic Super Bowl contender, you're a lock to make the playoffs for the most part. In most cases, I think that's a pretty safe assumption to make. And I think on top of that, you need a competent defense, you know, or if you don't have a competent defense, you need an offense that's the best in football, or at least top 3, or at least has the potential to just explode for 30 to 40 plus points on any given night. So you need one of those two, right? If you don't have a top 10, or at least a defense that's capable of getting stops when necessary, they don't have to actually, no, you don't have to be a top 10 defense. As long as you're, you know, above average, you know, as long as your defense is above average, they're able to get stops when it's necessary. They're able to play situationally. I think that's enough. But if you don't have that, then you need an offense like, for example, like the Chiefs. You need an offense that's so overwhelmingly explosive and dynamic to where it's offsetting, you know, a weak defense. Because we've seen Kansas City in the past, they've had defenses ranked in the bottom 20s, and yet here they are appearing in Super Bowls, winning Super Bowls. And so, you know, there are cases like that. But I think for the most part, you need a quarterback and a coach, right? A great quarterback and a coach, a duo. You need a competent and above average defense. You need an offense that could put up points in a variety of ways. You're not one-dimensional, you're multi-dimensional. And I think, yeah, those are pretty much the essential ingredients to field in a Super Bowl caliber team. You need a quarterback and a coach. You need an above average / competent / competent defense. And then you just need, what was I saying? Lost my train of thought. An offense that isn't just one dimensional, an offense that could score in a variety of ways, and then an offense that doesn't have very many weaknesses.
Okay, so I am so much harder on Super Bowl contenders than you. That's clear. I'll just go down the list. Number 1, forget the coaching for a second. I think you have to have a top 10 quarterback to be in the conversation of Super Bowl contenders, because you're not going to win a championship with a bad quarterback. Because we saw the 49ers go to the Super Bowl and their quarterback wasn't that great, they lost. Right, like if you don't have a good quarterback, which is the reason why I didn't think the Titans were Super Bowl contenders last season, because Ryan Tannehill's not top 10. Fantastic team though, by the way, they did great. Like, it was crazy how many different starting lineups they put out there last season, all the injury stuff, but they weren't top 10. So you have to have a top 10 quarterback, in my opinion. That's a must. Now, there's wiggle room elsewhere, right? And that leads to number 2. You have to have an identity, and whatever that identity is, you need to be the best at it. Like, if your identity is running the football, I should see you as you should be a top 5 running team in the NFL. If your identity is play action, you should be a top 5 play action team in the NFL. If your defense, you need to have, as you talked about earlier, a top 5 defense in the NFL. Like, whatever you are saying your identity is, that needs to be what you excel at the most. Like, I don't want to hear you tell me, for example, and I'm just using an example, I don't want to hear you tell me that the Broncos are their identity is running the ball, and then I go look at where they rank as far as the running downs and all that stuff, and they're ranked in the middle of the pack. No. Like, if your identity is running the ball, if your identity is play action, or if your identity is exceeding on third down, whatever that identity is, that, like, you look at the Golden State Warriors, for example, they're a third quarter basketball team. Every time you see the Warriors in the third quarter, they're probably demolishing the team. And if they're not, they're likely going to lose that game if they're not playing well in the third quarter. So you got to have an identity. You do need a fantastic coach. I don't think you need to have the best of the best coach, but you do need a competent coach. And when I say competent, we're talking 1 through 15. I think if you've got a coach that ranks in the top half of the league, coupled with one of those top 10 quarterbacks, you're in good position. But the 4th thing, and most importantly, is you got to be consistent. And it's the NFL, any given Sunday, right? Things happen. We see bad games. But I mean, like, you have to be consistently one of the best in the league. Like, you have to consistently be one of the teams that when we look across your schedule, we need to see some consistency with the amount of points you're scoring, the amount of points you're allowing. Like, as a team, you need to be a consistent team on both sides of the ball, and special teams even. Like, if I don't want to hear you tell me that, just so it's out there, the Miami Dolphins are a Super Bowl contender. Week 1, they scored 30 points, and week 2, they scored 5. That's a disgusting score to score 5 points in an NFL game. But there needs to be an element of consistency about what you're doing from a week-to-week basis. I don't want to see you just beat up on all the bad teams and then struggle against the good teams. No, that's not a Super Bowl contender. That's just a team that beats up one bad team. Yeah, pick on someone your own size. So once you get through all of that, the one thing that's most important to me as to what makes you truly a Super Bowl contender is every Super Bowl contender, and more importantly, every team that has ever won a Super Bowl has always had that one game in their season, right? And this last piece of criteria, you obviously can't judge until the season is played out, and usually until playoff time. But every team that has won a Super Bowl, you can say ever, but I'm not that well versed on ever. But every team in the Super Bowl in the last 5 years, 5 to 7 years, have all had one game where you looked at it and you said, "Wow, this team has all the makings of a Super Bowl contender," and they went on to win it all. Every team ever. I know we can go all the way back to what we had 103-year history now in the NFL. And you can look at all of those champions, or since the Super Bowl era, you can look at every single champion in the Super Bowl era. They have all had that one statement game. We looked at and you said, "Wow, this is a team that can win a Super Bowl. This is a team that can make it to the Super Bowl," right? You look at, for example, even last year. I know they didn't win it, but look at the Bengals last year against the Chiefs the first time around. That was their game. We're like, wow, this is a team that can win a Super Bowl. Look at the Rams. The Rams had a lot of up and downs over the course of their season. And even though they lost this game, when they played the Packers, you look at that team and you said, wow, like that's a team that can win a Super Bowl. You can even take their game against the Cardinals the second time around. I think you said, wow, like some teams have more than one, but every Super Bowl contender through the course of the season has at least one game where you say, yep, this team can win the Super Bowl. So with all that being said, right, there are 16 teams in the AFC. There are 32 teams in the league. I'll be honest with you. I think there's 6 Super Bowl contenders in the NFL. I think there's 3 on each side. I think that's fair. I think it's balanced. I don't think there's 10 Super Bowl contenders in the league because, well, there's only 14 teams that can make the playoffs. That's not a right ratio. So I think there's 6 Super Bowl contenders in the NFL. There's 3 in the AFC. There's 3 in the NFC. You might not think that. That's how I think. So let's play on your turf because I know that you're much looser with your grades than I am. Are the Broncos, we've already said it, but are the Broncos Super Bowl contenders this season and why?
Definitively and emphatically, yes, they are. They're not top tier because I think, to put a number on it, a loose number, 7, maybe 8, potentially 8, I believe, Super Bowl contenders in the National Football League. Not nearly as many in the NFC. I think the ratio is about double in the AFC to the NFC, but I think Denver, they definitely slot in.
Heading into this season, do you have in the NFC?
In the NFC, I only had 2.
Who are those 2?
The Rams and the Bucks.
That's fair.
You know, until I see, you probably had a Green Bay in yours, and I can't.
Don't get into it. Don't hurt me. Don't hurt me.
Okay.
We don't. That's fair. We don't have to get into that on camera. But I can't get mad at that. I can't get mad at that.
Okay. Yeah, and see, even you gotta agree it's fair, right? But no, I wouldn't be mad at someone for putting.
I don't agree with it, but it's fair. I don't agree with it.
Right, exactly.
It's fair.
But see, I'm not gonna argue you or Justin or anyone else that's willing to put Green Bay as a Super Bowl contender. I'm not gonna argue that. Like that's just okay. It's like, again, we're splitting the hairs here, but I feel like with Denver, because I have that many contenders, I'm putting them in its tiers, right? And so I have a tier 1.
So you said you have double the amount. So if there's 2 in the NFC, you've got 4 Super Bowl contenders in the AFC.
At least 4, yeah. At least 4.
At least 4. Okay.
Yeah. And so the Bills.
Yes.
The I'm blanking. Chargers. Okay. Bills and Chargers. The Bengals. And then I gotta have the Broncos there. Well, no. Those are my tier 1. Those are my tier 1 Super Bowl contenders.
So the Chiefs are not in your tier 1 Super Bowl.
No,
this is across.
This year they're not.
Across the league? Like AFC and NFC, or are you just talking AFC?
No, I'm talking across the league.
Oh, okay.
I think this year.
So are the Chiefs Super Bowl contenders at all to you this year?
See, this year, no.
Okay.
They're not. Not to me. Not this year. I believe.
I agree with you.
You agree? Okay, yeah. So this year they're not.
Okay.
They're not tier 1. They're not tier 2. They're not even Super Bowl contenders for me. They're not even division contenders for me. They'll make the playoffs.
I can agree with you. I 100% agree.
they'll make the playoffs. I think they're locks to make the playoffs. But going on a run where they're going to potentially make the Super Bowl, I don't see that happening. I wouldn't put it past them. It wouldn't be far fetched, but I wouldn't bet on it. I wouldn't expect it. And so going back to what I was saying, I think tier one across the NFL, tier one. Actually, no, if I'm going to say across the NFL, I got to include the other teams. But tier one has got to be the Bills, the Chargers, the Bengals, the Rams, and then the Bucks. I don't know if that's too many, but I have 5.
And so in your top 5, so you're bona fide contenders before football.
Yeah, bona fide. Yeah.
Bills, Rams, so the defending champions, the Bengals, the team they beat, the Bucks, and the Chargers are your.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Those are like my definitive. If I'm putting money, if I'm betting, those are my top 5 teams, and I'm betting. So those are my tier 1 Super Bowl contenders. Tier 2, there's only gonna be a couple teams that occupy, these spots where it's gonna be the Broncos and the Raiders. I'm very, very high on the Raiders, but I think the Raiders just barely make the cut. And so because I'm splitting them into tiers, I don't know if I'm cheating, but yes, because of that. And so in a way, almost by default, yes, the Broncos are Super Bowl contenders, but I'm not putting them, you know what I mean, in the top 3 or top 5. So I don't know if that's going to change the way, you view the question or whatnot, but that's kind of where I stand right now.
I said going into every season, there's usually 3 on each side. There are only, in my personal opinion, only 4 Super Bowl contenders this season that are bona fide, and we are probably going to see all 4 of these teams on Championship Sunday. Bills, Bengals, Rams, and Bucks are the only 4 teams that I look at and I say, yeah, one of these 4 teams today are going to win a championship. Obviously, you have to look at last year's Super Bowl matchup. I don't care what anybody says. Like the Bengals, this is not a flash in the pan football team.
No, not at all.
And I'll get into this in the Bills episode, but also when I kind of dive into the back half of my offseason series, the closer the NFL gets, the Bills have the best quarterback in the league, in my opinion. They have the best offense in the league. They have the best defense in the league. They made improvements in areas that I don't think anyone thought they would. Like they got their offensive line together. They added depth defensively. You can't turn your nose up to the fact that they brought in Von Miller. Like say whatever you want about Von Miller, he's Von Thing Miller, and you just added him to your defense. The defense that was already ranked number 1 in the league last season. That is major. So the Bills are the best team in football, in my opinion. The Bengals are the reigning AFC champions. While I do think that the AFC North will be tougher this season because Lamar Jackson will be healthy and well, actually, no. The AFC North this season, given what we've seen coming out of this whole Deshaun Watson stuff, the AFC North this season will be similar to what it was last season. The only difference is the Ravens game won't be blowouts. That's the only difference because you're not going to have a reliable quarterback in Cleveland. And even though I love Mitchell Trubisky, and it's a lean to my religion to be this high on Mitchell Trubisky, like whether it's Mitch or whether it's Kenny Pickett, I do have faith in the Steelers to still be a competent football team. Because Mike Tomlin at the helm has never given us a reason to think that this team can't figure out a way to get at least 8 wins on the season.
500.
I have the Steelers getting at least 8 wins this season. I could see them getting a little bit more, but I'll dive into that once we get into that episode of the show, or that episode of the series. But those are the 4 teams: Rams, Bucks, Bengals, Bills. Those are the 4 teams that I think are cream of the crop. Absolutely going into like. We will see at least 2 of those teams Championship Sunday. And the 2 teams that I know will see Championship Sunday is Bills and Rams. Unless something crazy happens over the course of their season, Bills and Rams will be playing in their respective conference championship games.
Mm-hmm. Barring injury.
Barring anything crazy happening to their season, like knocking on wood, Josh Allen getting hurt or Matt Stafford getting hurt, like barring anything crazy happening, like those 2 teams I think will be playing Championship Sunday. You've got the Bills, you've got the Bengals and the Bucks, 3 and 4 respectively. Okay, so that's my top 4. Then you get into the next batch, which is 5 through 8 for me, which are the teams that are like they're there, but they've got an if. That's my Packers because we don't know what we're going to look like without Devontae Adams. The defense I expect to be fantastic this season. We're already ranked preseason as like before the preseason even started. We're already ranked as one of the top 10 defense in the league, and it makes sense because all the talent. But without Devontae Adams, I have confidence, but it's going to be interesting to see who steps up at the wide receiver position. So their if is the wide receivers, it's the Packers. This is not to stroke anyone's ego, and I mean this wholeheartedly. I think that you have to look at the Los Angeles Chargers, as you mentioned. You have to look at the Las Vegas Raiders, as you mentioned. The Raiders have always been a team that's all around, and I think we don't give Derek Carr enough love because he's not a sexy quarterback, because he doesn't do anything sexy. But they now have Devontae Adams. Oh, and by the way, they have the third best tight end in football in Darren Waller. They still have Josh Jacobs, who I think is a top 10 running back in the league. They have they have a fantastic offensive line, in my opinion, one of the best in the league, and they have a really good defense that really came into its own in the back half. I expect that to continue. The Chargers, I've always been high on the Chargers because I'm high on Justin Herbert. The one if for the Chargers, though, is their coaching. And the one if for the Raiders is also their coaching, because we've seen Josh McDaniels come out and be a head coach before, and it didn't work for him. Now, in his defense, if I'm not mistaken, that was when he was in Detroit.
No. Denver with Tim Tebow.
He was with Denver, excuse me. And you can make an argument of what happened, but I think this is a better team with the Raiders. He got a lot of talent. If Josh McDaniels can't get it done here, I don't think he'll ever get it done, because this is a really good team. So I've got Packers, Raiders, Chargers, and that fourth team in that eighth spot is the Ravens. I think the Ravens are going to get back to their winning ways now that Lamar Jackson comes back. He's going to be healthy. I know they've got this whole contract thing kind of looming over their head. I think they'll be okay. The Broncos are They will. The Broncos are my next tier, my 9 through 12. They're the teams that I just don't know how to grade them, but I know that they're going to the playoffs. That's the Cowboys, the Eagles, the Broncos, and I'm drawing a blank here, the Chiefs. I don't know how to grade the Chiefs. Because their defense I know is going to be bad this season. Because they lost Tyrann Mathieu, and he was the best player on their team. And even with Tyrann Mathieu, this defense struggled immensely last season. I can't call the Chiefs at all. The Cowboys are the Cowboys. And while the Cowboys are one of the better teams in the NFC, and while the best team in the NFC East, whatever that's worth, because it's the NFC East, like, they've got the best quarterback and they have Mike McCarthy, but they did lose Cedric Wilson, and they lost Amari Cooper, and they lost Randy Gregory on the defense. They've taken a lot of hits and from their core last season. You have the Broncos, and the only reason why I say the Broncos aren't Super Bowl contenders right now is because of the same reason why Justin Marvel told us a couple months ago. And I don't know if you remember, but Justin said that he's not high on the Chargers or the Raiders because, as constructed, those teams haven't won anything. Well, I remember. The Broncos haven't won anything either. Granted, this is all new construction, but the fact still remains. I don't think it's going to happen. And I said this a couple months ago, and you looked at me like I was crazy. The Broncos could suck this season. I don't think they will. Let me say it again. I do not think the Broncos will suck. I have the Broncos in the playoffs. But it is not completely far-fetched that the Broncos suck this season. And when I mean suck, I mean they have a bad record. Like, we really haven't given the Raiders enough love in this division. Like, I know that the Chiefs are the Chiefs and the Chargers are the Chargers and the Broncos are the Broncos, but we can't forget the fact that Derek Carr and Devontae Adams have been homies since Fresno State. Oh, and by the way, Devontae Adams is the best wide receiver in football. Oh, and by the way, they've got the third best tight end in football in Darren Waller. The only thing that could undo all of this momentum that it seems the Raiders may have coming into the season is how well Josh McDaniels coaches them from the sidelines. That's the only thing that can undo the Raiders' momentum and their potential. But we haven't given them enough love. Like, you can't call any of these 6 AFC West games this season because you just don't know how they're going to go. Like, conventional wisdom was just to give all home teams the win, and at that, that's 3-3. No one's sweeping this division. I bet money on that. No one's sweeping this division. I don't even think anyone's walking away with 4 wins this season in the division. And the only team I give the nod to win 4 games in this division is the Chargers. It's the only team I'd give the nod to win 4 games this season. But right now, at best, it splits down the middle because all 4 of these teams are just that good. It's really, really difficult. I don't think the Broncos are Super Bowl contenders, though. It has a lot to do with the fact that this is all new. It also has a lot to do with the fact that the coaching staff, specifically Nathaniel Hackett. I love Nathaniel Hackett. I understand what Nathaniel Hackett has done for my hopes and my sanity as far as how great Aaron Rodgers has been the past 2 years and the fact that and all that. I get all of that. He is an instrumental piece of the reason why we've won 13 games each of the last 3 seasons or 3 seasons at this point. Yeah. I understand all of it. He is a first-time head coach, though. And if I'm not mistaken, if memory serves me correctly, the last time a first-year head coach made the playoffs with a winning record, or not with a winning record, but like the first time that a first-year head coach made the playoffs with at least 10 wins on the season was Jim Harbaugh with the Niners. I think if memory serves, because I know last year Nick Sirianni did it, but they had 9 wins.
Yeah.
Well, we did it when we were 13-3, but so I guess it's Matt LaFleur. But like the last time we looked at the team with the first-year head coach and said Super Bowl contender, it was that team. Because even though we went 13-3 that year, our first year with Matt LaFleur, no one expected that to come because despite us going 13-3, Aaron Rodgers didn't have the sexiest season, even though I've said endless times it's because he was with the first-year head coach, but no one wants to acknowledge it. Whatever. But the Broncos, if I have to rank Super Bowl contenders, I put them at number 10. I think they slot in as the 10th best team this season right now. If I have to rank them, they can easily move up the list, right? Things change.
And they will.
And they will. They will be a really good team this season. I expect them to be, right? But there are just a lot of ifs with the Denver Broncos. And again, I don't think I know we say it all the time and we're just looking at it from a quarterback standpoint, but no, all four of these teams in the AFC West are really good teams. Like the Chiefs have lost key pieces on both sides of the ball, and Tyreek Hill and Tyrann Mathieu, but that's still a B+ team at worst. The Chargers are a B+ team at worst. Like all of these teams are B+ at worst, and there's not another division in football that has 4 B+ in the division. There's not. This is going to be a tough division, and the divisional play, I think, is what could potentially undo the Broncos. All of these teams, really, but specifically the Broncos, because it's all new. Like everything is new for them. That's my one hesitation. And so they're in that group of teams, like I said, 9 through 12, where you look at and you're like, I just can't grade them. And because I can't grade them, it's hard for me to put them in there right now. But as I said a couple months ago to you and Justin, as I've been saying pretty much this whole time, they'll move up. I'm sure they will, because Russell Wilson's Russell Wilson, and this is a talented roster on both sides. And I know I've sounded kind of hard on them so far this episode, but don't get me wrong. The Broncos are going to be a playoff team, right? And them being a playoff team, anything can happen in the playoffs. I think they'll be a playoff. But right now, we do this all the time where we kind of look at, we see crazy moves. Like, and you guys could go back to I won't make you watch it. It was a terrible, don't watch it. The very first episode of this show was disgusting. I filmed it in my kitchen on Zoom with my friends. It was a terrible episode. I didn't know anything about lighting or any of that. It was a disgusting episode. But in that episode, the very first episode of this show, I said that the Bucs weren't going to the Super Bowl. And that was a couple weeks after they got Tom Brady. What'd they do that season? They went to the Super Bowl. So I have been on the wrong side of the fence here before. And unlike Steezy, I am usually married to my picks. This is one pick that's not a pick. It's just rankings. Rankings change. As the guy who has your original name, Stephen A. Smith, would say, okay, lists like these are fluid. All right? Things change. They move up and down. Life happens. But as it stands right now, the Broncos are not a Super Bowl contender to me. And I know that was a very, very, very long answer, but I had to illustrate it to you in a way that made sense. I took your tier thing and I kind of ran with it because I wanted to make as much sense as possible.
No, bro, and you did a phenomenal job. Great job breaking it down and really, feeding it to the audience. I think the audience now, they definitely should leave once they tune in and watch this episode, of course, feeling a lot more knowledgeable, feeling a lot more versed, especially as it pertains to, where they rank these teams and whatnot. So, no, great job on your end, bro. A couple of things I want to add here. You forgot to mention Hunter Renfrow, who was a Pro Bowl slot wide receiver for the Las Vegas Raiders.
Hunter Renfrow. I love Hunter Renfrow. My apologies to Hunter Renfrow on that.
Right, and so I had to give him his respect because you talked about Darren Waller, Devontae, and Derek Carr, and Josh McDaniels, and Josh Jacobs in the offensive line and the defense. But hold on, man, this man has gotten way too much disrespect to get and earning even more disrespect. And so it's like, I gotta mention it though.
I didn't even mean to. It was just a quick rant. Hunter Renfrow is the best slot receiver in football. Like I 100% he is, and I've said that on Twitter like 10 times over the course of their game against the Bengals and the course of the back half of their season. Like Hunter Renfrow is the best slot. So I am so Hunter. If you're listening to this, I'm really sorry. I love you. If you check my tweets, you'll know that I do. And if you ever need something to do on a Saturday morning, I have nothing to do on Saturday mornings. I will talk to you on this show every Saturday morning. If that's what you want, but I love you. I really do. And I'm so serious. I didn't mean to. I'm so sorry.
No, you're good. Just make sure every time you mention him, you got to heap his praises every single time. That's how you make up for something like that. For something that egregious, Dwayne.
Yeah, egregious. That was. There's a lot to go down the list though for the Raiders. They got a lot of good stuff going on. I can't. You're right though. He is He's the fourth best player on the team. I apologize. I was supposed to mention. I'm deeply sorry. Deeply sorry.
There you go. Now that we have that out of the way, and thank you for doing that, brother. I just wanted to add real quick. I know this is kind of off topic, but you mentioned the Cowboys as essential playoff locks. For me, I don't even think they win the division next year. I think they've lost too much. I mean, they've lost Lyle Collins, Connor Williams. I know he wasn't the best offensive lineman, but they've lost way too much.
Because the NFC is so weak this season, they have to make the playoffs. Because the only three teams that are locks to win their division are the Packers, the Rams, and the Bucks. That's it. And even if the Cowboys lose the division, which I think they will, I think the Eagles will win the division this year, and they'll have the fourth spot. I have the Vikings making the playoffs. Outside of that, there's two spots. I think the Saints so you've got teams like the Saints and you got teams like the Cardinals and the 49ers. The Cowboys, despite all the losses, should be good enough to make the playoffs this season. I'll dive more into that Cowboy, and when we get into the Cowboys episode of the show, of the series, which is coming up in maybe a week and a half. But I know that people don't like when I talk about the Cowboys because they think I hate the Cowboys, and it's not that I hate the Cowboys. It's just we've got expectations that we need to meet, and they're not meeting them, and someone needs to hold them accountable. That's number one. But number two, more importantly, despite all those losses, you have a top 10 quarterback in the NFL in Dak Prescott. And what I will say is if Dak Prescott and the Cowboys don't make the playoffs, that says a lot more about Dak than it does about the Cowboys. Because Dak Prescott hasn't played good football without Amari Cooper. That's a fact. Look at his stats. His best years are when he's throwing the ball to Amari Cooper. Now he doesn't have Amari Cooper, but he does have CeeDee Lamb to throw the ball to. If the Cowboys don't make the playoffs and Dak has another one of those seasons where he's not good without Amari Cooper, we need to start looking at Dak Prescott. But I'll get into all of that when I talk about the Cowboys. But I just have to think the conventional wisdom would tell me that the Cowboys, I think, are better than the 49ers. And I think what's going to work in the Cardinals' disadvantage is without D-Hop for those first 6 weeks, if they don't play really good football those first 6 weeks and leave those first 6 weeks with a solid record, and I don't mean like 3-3, although that would be that would be fortunate for them to be 3-3. If they can't come out at least 3-3 out of 6 weeks, I don't know if the Cardinals can recover. Because we saw the Cardinals start out 7-0 and then they collapsed. They only won 3 games in the back half of the season. They went 3-7 the rest of the way. So the Cowboys, I'm just thinking they should make it because they like the rest of the NFC East have 10 games against the 2 worst divisions of football. 6 games in their division, 4 games against the AFC South. They should beat the Jags. They should beat the Texans. I think they should beat the Titans and or the Colts. Like when you've got this, when you're tied with Washington for the easiest schedule or the second easiest schedule in football, and you have 10 games that are winnable, just handing to you on a silver platter, you should be a playoff team. And so that's why they're in there. That's why they're in there because I think they'll be Cowboy fans in history will tell you that they should be in there. I don't think they'll win the division, but I think they should be in there.
No, and that's fair. But one more point I wanted to talk about, we're probably going to talk about this in the next topic, but I do agree with you. And I think there is a small chance. I think there is a possibility. I think it is feasible that Denver does struggle to the point where they end up, barely making the playoffs or barely missing the playoffs. And it honestly takes, it really depends on how long it takes for them to get acclimated, especially offensively, right? I mean, Russell Wilson, as great of a quarterback as he is, he's still going to need time to formulate chemistry with the Jerry Jeudy, with the Cortland Sutton, with the Tim Patrick, with the KJ Hamler, who's recovering from a torn ACL. Nathaniel Hackett, how long is it going to take time for him to implement what he wants to do and kind of operate in that, what is it, a zone run type of scheme over there in Denver? They have running backs and Melvin Gordon and Javonte Williams. The offensive line still needs to gel. They need to be able to hold, and I think it's feasible that Denver, does finish maybe with a record barely under 500 or barely above 500, just because I do think it's going to take time for, as great of a quarterback as Russell Wilson is, he's going to have to take time to get acclimated to his receivers, formulate that chemistry. Nathaniel Hackett, how long is it going to take for him to kind of, have his team adapt what he wants to do offensively, defensively? There are some new faces. They do have a new defensive coordinator. That division is going to be very rough. So I think it's feasible, but I think if I had to put money on it, look, they won seven games without any sort of competent quarterback play. And they are returning, a majority of that foundation to this year's team. And so I think 10, is a reasonable number. I think the lowest I could see them going is 8-9, 9-8, in the ceiling, 11-6. But if I had to put money on it, if I had to bet on it, I think the Denver Broncos finish 10-7.
Denver Broncos have an interesting schedule because they have 6 games against this division, obviously, and then they got 4 games against the AFC South as well, I believe. All of those games are winnable games for them. I have them sweeping the AFC South. I've got them going 3-3 in the division right now off the first look. So that's 10 wins there. They'll be somewhere between 8 and 11 wins. It's going to depend on what those AFC West games look like specifically. That's really all it comes down to. However they look in those games is going to determine just how good they are, honestly. 8 to 10 wins seems reasonable. I haven't deep dived into every single game of the schedule as far as because for me, predicting games is more than just which team's better. It's also about where they're playing that team in their schedule and what that other team could potentially look like. So at first look, before my deep dive, I'm going to say 8 to 10 wins. I will be doing an episode once all 32 of these episodes are done for the football, where I do give my schedule predictions or my record predictions, and then also give my playoff pictures. That's coming later once I truly deep dive and start actually looking in and seeing, okay, matchups and seeing where each team is playing, win and home or away, primetime, things like that. I think all those things factor. Maybe you guys don't, but I do. I think there are a lot of things that factor into picking a game outside of just picking the better team. Because if that's the case, picking the better team, you'd have 16 teams, or you'd have 10 teams with at least 13 wins. And I don't think that's going to happen. So there's a lot that goes into it. But if I got to go first look, I'm going to say they're going to be between 8 and 10 wins. I think at most they'll win 11 games. I don't think any of it, though, will be enough to win the division. I still have the Chargers winning the division this season because I think Herbert's going to be an MVP candidate this season, much like I thought he was last season. And the defense should be better than it was last year. The only like I said earlier, is just the coaching. Thank you, Steezy, for coming on the show. I appreciate you for coming on the show. I know we had some technical issues there towards the end of the show that will be fixed and out of the show by the time that you guys are listening to it. So you guys don't even know what I'm talking about, but whatever. I know you guys love hearing Steezy on the show more than me, so I'll make sure, if it were up to me, Steezy would be on every show. In fact, if it were up to me, this would be Go Talk with Steezy, because you guys just love Steezy. And I just kind of be here clicking buttons and stuff. But Steezy, as always, my man, please let everybody know where they can find you and all your content.
Hey, Dwayne, as always, bro, I love doing this with you, bro. You're a great mind, smart, intellectual, and I like surrounding myself with people like that, entertaining to listen to as well. So, as always, I'm thankful to be on, bro. It's always a pleasure. It's always an honor. And to everybody out there, yo, man, if you want to subscribe at Go Talk Podcast with Marcus, you're missing out. Simply put, and if you want to keep up to date with what my man does on a regular basis, he's been dropping a whole bunch of content. Follow him on Twitter, same handle. Follow him on Instagram, same handle. We both been putting in a whole bunch of work, and so if you guys can support with the follow, subscription, comment, share, all that good stuff, we would greatly appreciate it. And then last but not least, if you want to find me, if you like what you hear, at Steezy A Smith, SteezyASmith. Cover the Seahawks, cover the NBA, cover the NFL, a little bit of boxing. I'm trying to touch on other sports as well, soccer, baseball, so a little bit of everything. But if you're a big sports fan, you guys subscribe to both of our channels, at Go Talk Podcast with Marcus and at Steezy A Smith. I promise you, it'll be a good time.
Appreciate you, as always, for coming on the show, man. Listen, 60% of you that watch this, that are going to watch this on YouTube, are not subscribed. Subscribe to the channel. It's not that. It's free. It's not that difficult to do. Okay. There's a little red box that says subscribe right under the video, right under the like counter. If it doesn't say subscribed, then press the button. Okay. I am appreciative to the 108, I believe, subscribers we have now, right? I am very thankful for all of you, but there's more of you out there that aren't subscribed to the channel, but you still watch the show. And while I appreciate that you watch the show, I need you to subscribe so that you don't miss anything else. It's like TikTok. All right, like you can see me on your For You page and then never see me again. I want you to see me all the time, not for my benefit, for your benefit, because you're missing out on some good stuff here. Like we are a little over 150 episodes in here, and there's a now look, the first 20 or so episodes suck. Don't watch those. Those episodes are all trash. They were shot on Zoom with bad lighting and bad cameras and all that stuff. They suck. But okay, I'm being honest here. They suck. But episode 21 and beyond, oh, that's good stuff. That's good stuff there. Look, if you want to look, there's a couple I'll point out to you. Okay, I did episode 150 with my guy Steezy. That's a solid episode. There's a couple live episodes in there, you know what I'm saying, that are really good about football with my guys from Stuff About Sports. You should check those out. There's some wrestling stuff on there. It's fantastic. Look, there's a little bit of everything. You like wrestling? I got it. You like football? I got it. You like basketball? I got that too. Anything that you could possibly be searching for except for hockey, soccer, and baseball, I got it. So just subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out, okay? I don't want you turning on ESPN and listening to those lousy takes. I don't want you turning on Fox Sports and listening to Skip Bayless just yell at Shannon Sharp, because that's not good for business, okay? I don't want you to turn on NBC or anything else. Come here and get all your sports stuff. I have posted an episode every day the last 2 weeks because I love you, all of you at home watching and listening, whether you're on your car, at work, at the grocery store, whatever you're doing. I appreciate you for listening. This was an hour and 20 minutes of me talking, okay? I appreciate all of you for listening. I really, really, really do. But if you're not subscribed, subscribe. You're missing out, bro. You're missing out. Anyway, whatever. Thank you guys for watching, as always. For Steezy A. Smith, this is Marcus of Talk with Marcus signing off. Thank you guys. And as always, you guys enjoy the rest of your lives.